the Africans and African Americans had contributed very little to the American experience because the things that they wrote down were very rare. But the oral tradition was extremely strong. This idea of storytelling. You know, in a society where most people didn't matter if you were white, if you were black, if you were free or slave, but for the majority of people, you did not attend school. You couldn't write your name. You signed your mark. You know, as Americans, we really do believe this idea that in America you can really, start out as nothing and buy your own bootstrap and pull yourself up. Because really, when we peel back the layer and understand of our history, most people start off as poor people. So stories, again, is another thing that's how you trained your children. That's how you told them who to watch out for, what part of the woods not to go in, about their history, about their culture, about how to survive, how to maintain in slavery. Storytelling is also another way when teaching slavery in the classroom can be great to provide students with perhaps some of those old folk tales that exist, but also to allow them to create stories by using primary documents such as Richard gave, runaway ads, and taking the structure of an existing story and putting it in a new context because that's what people did. The same stories you hear in Africa, you hear in Europe, you hear in Asia. They just been the characters have been changed a bit. The situation has been slightly changed, but this universality is very important. I want to tell you a story about something that occurred at Mount Vernon, and then I'm going to have to go and give you guys a chance to ask any questions that you might have. But this story is a story that I love. This story is about a boy whose name is Jack. You all say Jack? Jack was a boy who lived in Mount Vernon, and he was learning how to be a miller, right? So he was working out of the mill. You all know that General Washington had his own mill, right? General Washington was a bad man. He had his own mill. Not only was he able to grind his own stuff, but he would have people pay him to grind their stuff up for him, right? Not only did he have his own mill, but he had a distillery. Now that's what I love right there. He had his own distillery. I mean, he was a diversified businessman. And what's interesting, when you think about who actually ran those diversified industries that he had, who were they? The enslaved community. The miller was a slave. Still was, these are the people who ran those businesses for General Washington. So the young slave boys would have to be trained, around 9 or 10, they'd start a little bit. By 11 or 12, they're doing some real stuff. So Jack was being trained with the millers. And he had always been told, do not go into the mill race. You don't want to do that. It's just something there that you don't want to deal with. Stay away from the mill race, don't get in. So one day, on a Sunday, Jack decided that he was going to go to the mill race creek and go fishing. Now he had been told, look, stay away from the mill. So he was getting his worms he had dug up the night before, and his mother actually saw him with his fishing pole in his hand. And she said, look here, what's the boy's name? She said, Jack. She said, look, today is Sunday. And we slave folks here for General Washington who work out in the field, we get one day a week off. One full day, that's Sunday. We work 6 days a week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, half a day on Saturday. And the day we get off of Sunday, you don't need to be going to try to go fishing. What you need to do is come on, go with me, and maybe we should go on to church. Jack looked at his mama because, since he was learning to be a miller, he was about 12 years old, so he was grown. You see, at least he thought he was grown, I got one 17 thinks he's grown. I keep telling him, you ask me for money, you're not grown. Got one that's 19 in the sophomore in college, thinks she's grown. I said, when you call and ask me for money, you are not grown. But old Jack, he thought he was grown. He said, look here, Mama. I work hard during the week. 12 years old now. Being trained to be, he said, I got to lift barrels. I got to lift sacks. I want to take my Sunday, and I don't want to go hear some preacher holler at me all day long. Because back in the 1800s, it didn't matter if he was a Baptist, a Methodist, or a Presbyterian, they all hollered. You hear what I said? Yeah. They all hollered, okay? And he said, Mama, I'm going to spend my Sunday fishing. Jack's mother, she was a little upset that he would talk to him. And she looked at him, she said, boy, I can see that you think that because you're grown, that you know everything, and the grown people around here can't tell you nothing. Jack said, that's right. Well, I'm a man. Lifting barrels, yay high, sacks. That's right. She said, Jack, look, if you don't remember nothing that I said, you listen to me right now. He said, well, Mama, you need to hear him say it because the fish is waiting on me. She said, Jack, grown folks put here to tell you what you need to know to survive and live a long time. And you just hurt my heart. He said, Mama, the fish. And his mother said, well, Jack, since you don't want to listen to nothing, I said, listen to me now when I tell you that God don't like ugly. Jack said, well, look here, Mama, you can go out there and be with God, but I'm going to be with the fish. So he went on out to the mill creek, right? And he threw his fishing pole on out to the mill creek. And he sat right down there. And he waited for some fish to bite the mill creek. But guess what? No fish bite. So he sat there a little longer. He said, this is a fine day for fishing. I'm glad I ain't out there listening to some preacher or going to Sunday market like the rest of the folks. I'm going to sit down and catch me some fish. So he sat there and he waited. But guess what? No fish bite. So he sat there a little longer. He finally fell asleep. He said, that's how it sounded playing. And he fell asleep when he woke up. And when he woke up, he saw his rod. And his rod was sitting still right there. And guess what? Well, no fish biting. He said, shucks, this day might not be though. He said, ain't no fish biting. Shucks, what am I going to do? And just when he said that, all of a sudden, he saw his line in the tub. So he grabbed it and said, whoa! And he said, whoa, whoa, whoa. And he was fighting with the fish. I was pulling him, whoa, and pulled him in the water. And Jack was fighting with this fish. This fish gave him one big tug and almost pulled him in the water. But when that fish tugged, Jack was smart because he knew if he held onto the pole, when that fish pulled, what would happen to him? He'd go in the water. So guess what he did? He let go of the pole. He said, guess it won't for me to catch no fish today. Well, it's a perfectly good Sunday. What am I going to do with my time? He said, I know. I can go and throw rocks at the people who coming home from church. So he started walking away from the mill creek, picking up rocks, putting them in his pocket. And when he was walking away picking up rocks, he heard something behind him. So turned around real fast, see what it was. He said, that must have been that big fish I lost that was jumping in the creek. He said, oh, well, that's the one that got away. And he turned back around and started picking up rocks and putting them in his pocket. But all of a sudden, he heard something behind him saying, stop! Now, Jack knew that he was the only one out there. And when he heard this voice from behind him say, stop! He didn't want to look around, so he started walking a little faster. And when he started walking faster, that voice got louder and said, I said, stop! And before Jack knew it, he wanted to take a step. But his feet would not move. When he tried to move, his feet wouldn't move. Jack got scared. Now this young man who thought he was a grown boy, when he found he couldn't move his feet, he started shaking and he said, Mom! And the voice behind him said, turn around! And Jack said, I don't want to turn around! And the voice said, I said, turn around! Before Jack knew it, his body started turning toward the mill creek and he couldn't stop it. He said, oh, let me go! And before he knew it, he was turning all the way around and he didn't want to look and see what was doing. So he didn't want to look, so he closed his eyes real quick and he said, and the voice from in front of him said, open your eyes. Jack said, I don't want to. And the voice said, I said, open your eyes. Before Jack knew it, his eyes popped open. And right there in the mill creek was the ugliest thing he'd ever seen in his entire life. It was this old greenish brown thing that had his eyeballs hanging out the side of him like that. And where his eyeballs was, he had fish heads right in place, and his skin wasn't like it was mine. It was all bubbly and green. It was nasty. And he looked at his fingers, and his fingers, at the end of his fingers, he had little fish heads and his fingers. And Jack looked down bubbling, brown and green looking slimy stuff. He had snakes just slitting all out his chest. And he stood there looking at Jack, and Jack was just frozen. And the thing said, so you think that because you're young, that you know everything, and the grown people can't tell you nothing? And Jack said, no. And that thing said, since you think that because you're young and the grown people can't tell you nothing, then you need to be living in the Mill Creek with the fish. He stretched out what looked like was an arm, but it had all that brownish, green, seaweed-like stuff just hanging down, and the little fingers, when he looked closer, it was leeches on it. And he said, come to me. And before Jack knew it, he couldn't help it, but his body started moving toward the Mill Creek. And as his body started moving toward the Mill Creek, his skin started to get tingly all over. And the reason why his skin was getting tingly all over, because his skin was slowly peeling off his body and being replaced with brownish, green, bubbling, seaweed looking. Nasty. And his eyesight started to get real blurry. He couldn't hardly see them because his eyeballs started popping out the sockets. And his eyeballs was popping out the socket, hanging down like so, and a fish eye came up like that, you see. And as the water got to his waist, he looked down at his chest. And in between all the bubbling slime, he looked down at his chest. That poor boy looked down at his chest. And when he looked down at his chest, in between all the green, bubbling and dripping slime, he saw he had snakes coming out. He had snakes coming all out his chest. And you know what? That Sunday morning was the last day his mother ever saw him. Now, I don't know what happened though. What was his name? Yeah. Old Jack. But thank you very much. You too, kind. I love you for cleaning up after me. Thank you. That's why I needed that. You know what? You are an incredible lady. Let me tell you. His mother never saw him again. But some say that the real story behind it is that there were some young slaves out at Mount Vernon who decided to take a swim in the mill chase. Didn't know how to swim very well, got pulled under. That could have been the story. Could have been the story that maybe old Jack decided that, living at Mount Vernon wasn't the place for him, so he ran away. What the story is up for you and your students to create, actually. You can make it up, have an own storytelling session in your class. But regardless what the real story is, I can tell you this. If any kid think that they're grown because they, got a little height, because they got a little older, I always like to tell them, the adults are put here to help you. Like doing slavery, they help you to survive, teach you things you need to know. But if you think that because you're young that you know everything, then just remember one thing. If you won't listen to me, and that's that God don't like. Oh, y'all know. Thank you so much.